Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the Richmond City Council meeting of Monday, June 13th, 2022. May I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or discussion? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions or deletions or changes?
Yes, Your Worship, we have one agenda correction, and it's for item 7, which is on CNCL page 4, and this is the Electrical Vehicle Charger Program Update Additional Motion. And the motion that's on the agenda should be changed to read as follows: that a letter be sent to the Province of BC Minister of Housing requesting right to charge legislation confirming the right of an owner or occupant of a strata unit to charge an EV that will promote installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in more strata and apartment buildings.
All right, with that change, may I have a motion on the agenda?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? So you see the change that's been made in number 7. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So now we go to our first item, which is a presentation. We'll call forward our Director of Facilities and Project Development, Jim Young, who will make an introduction, and there will be a presentation.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And yes, we're very, very pleased to be able to advise Council that we've been the successful recipient of the Outstanding Facility Award from the Recreation Facility Association of BC. I have with me here today Jenna Stevens. She's the President-elect. The Minaroo Centre for Active Living, the recipient for this award, is a 110,000 square foot facility. It has a first-class aquatics facility, has a first-class senior center, and an outdoor sports facility. It's something that involved multiple departments throughout the city. In particular, the Community Services Department, the Facilities Department, and of course our Finance Department through purchasing. I'd like to actually ask now Jenna if she'd like to say a few words about the award.
Absolutely. And thank you, Your Worship, for having us here today as a representative of the Recreation Facilities Association of BC. So I'm very proud and pleased to present the Bill Wojcik 2022 Outstanding Facility Award to Minaroo Centre of Active Living. There was amazing things done with this center. I'm very proud of the initiatives, the operational efficiencies, and sustainable initiatives that were done with this facility. So the Bill Wojcik Award is named after, it's a memorial award named after the president from 1962 to 1963. And this has been issued for a number of years since then as a result of any initiative that's been done as far as operational efficiencies and being able to deliver amazing recreational services to the community.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'll come around and receive the award. So thank you very much to both of you. It probably goes without saying, but we can say it anyway, that Minaroo Centre for Active Living is a facility that not only have we won awards for it, it is something that other cities are coming and touring to see what we've done there, something of which we are very proud. And every person, whether they go into the aquatics facility and the related recreational opportunities there, or to the seniors part of it, they are always very pleased with it, and it's been a wonderful addition to the city. So thank you for that recognition for this fine facility. Thank you very much. Now, there was nobody pre-registered to sign as a delegation, and there's only staff members who are here with us tonight, so we don't need to resolve into committee of the whole. We'll go straight to the consent agenda, which involves receipt of committee minutes, the public electric vehicle charger program update, the additional motion, the Richmond Animal Shelter Public Art Project terms of reference, the Steveston Cannery Channel, 2022 BC Energy Step Code, and the GHG requirements for new buildings. Then we have land use applications, which will go to public hearing on July 18th. They are at 9231 and 9271 Kilby Street. They are both rezonings from single detached RS1E zone to the single detached RS2A zone. So may I have a motion to adopt those items by general consent?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be in support of everything on the consent agenda. I'll just speak briefly to a few of them. First one is item number 7, which the one that was amended there about the right to charge legislation. And just actually in the news today, hearing about lithium-ion batteries being a source of fires in buildings and a loss of life as well. I think it's even more important that we make sure we have publicly accessible charging stations so that people aren't wiring up inappropriate methods to charge vehicles, where I've heard from a number of people the biggest hesitation going forward with one is being able to wire it to their house where they can see it while it's being charged. And so I think public right to charge legislation is what we should be calling for, and I think this letter will help get there for not just Richmond, but all of BC, which is a leader in electric vehicle purchasing so far. I'll support the public art project terms of reference. The number 9, the Steveston Cannery Channel. Myself running aground, albeit in a 9-foot boat, not a big hazard there. But I definitely know the issues related to running aground in the Fraser River, where you can't see below the surface at all. So relying on technology or the guidance of expert navigational ship captains will still be a problem if this is not addressed. So I think Richmond stepping forward, taking a role in the dredging request for funding and calling out other jurisdictions to join suit. And I also would hope that future Port of Vancouver may have some, if not funding, expertise in navigation through this area and equipment that could be utilized for this. Finally, I'll speak to item number 10. I do have a question of staff on item number 10 as well. So I've been looking into the BC Energy Step Code Part 9 residential and looking at a number of other municipalities have been listed on BC Housing kind of website best practices related to the Local Energy Efficiency Partnership, or LEAP, L-E-E-P, and also in the program related to Integrated Design Process, or IDP, for high performance homes. So my question to staff in this is related to our benchmarking capability. I know we've talked about it for other buildings and other types of structures, but does the city have step 5 homes being built? I know we have some quite large houses in the well over 10,000 square foot, but do we have any of those that, or less than that size, that are kind of showcased? I've noticed many other municipalities have kind of put a few of theirs on the forefront, and then their councils consider those as like benchmarks. So when other projects are brought forward, they can be kind of said, well, it's been done there. Have you considered these options? And then I have one more question after that. So.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, there is an incentive program to achieve the top step for Part 9 buildings, single detached and duplex specifically. And with this change in legislation in the bylaw, the step 5 becomes an option, so that would be at the highest stage. I'll ask my staff team, Norm Conley, who's online, if in fact there are any buildings built to the highest step.
Through Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, at this point in time, we don't have a record of a step 5 single detached home or duplex being built. We know some are in the design stage now and contemplating that. And with respect to the highest level achieved so far, we've got a couple of step 4 homes that we're almost at the step 5 level. And there's been some interest also in Passive House, which is de facto step code level 5. So we're hoping to have some promising news in about a year with that.
Thank you. For the public, and then I have a further question. On our City of Richmond website, there is a link, which I appreciate, to valuable resources, such as the Best Practices Guide for Air Sealing and Insulation Retrofits, which is basically building weatherization. And then I noted the series that the city has created called Building Matters, and I saw that's a 4-part series, and it said that there's maybe more coming. Could staff comment on if there are more coming, and what would be the theme, or what do staff see as the next need that the public and builders have to get better buildings?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, again, I'll inquire with my team if they have knowledge on the specific programs.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, perhaps I could lend some information on this. Building Matters is a program where we bring it's a series where we bring best practices to the building community. We have building science experts on staff. We do believe that in combination with the next in the series of what we call Builders Breakfast, we will be outlining the next steps in the Energy Step Code and the greenhouse gas emissions initiatives.
Great, thank you. Through the worship to staff, I appreciate that, and keeping that site up to date, because I've heard from a number of builders in Richmond that are very keen on seeing the development of this and being ahead of the curve. So thank you.
All right, Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple matters. I'll support everything that's on the agenda. And a shout out for the public art at the animal shelter. Another good proposal, and keep up the great work there. Just a quick question on the Stevenson Cannery channel, Your Worship. I support everything that's there, and I think it's very, very important. And I'm just wondering, we weren't asked for it, but I'm just wondering about a letter to the appropriate province and the feds because of the downloading that has totally come. At one time when I was on the board, we sent Bob Baziak back to Ottawa to pick up $180,000 for dredging, or $350,000. And I'm wondering if we, in conjunction with a number of partners at the moment, it's the Stevenson Harbour Authority, shouldn't be writing a letter to the feds to let them know and remind them of their level of commitment to an active fishing channel. If you go down at 6:30 in the morning, I go for my walk. There are about 8 to 10 boats heading on out and to fish. So I'm just wondering about a lobby and a PR challenge with the Harbour Authority and any other partners doing that. So maybe take that under advisement, but I think it should be done. The other question I have on the feasibility of the city-owned and operating dredging, I'm assuming that relates to that we would do that in-house and we would provide the operations, and we would look to our workforce possibly doing it and being trained to do dredging.
I don't think it's been defined at this point. We're just looking at conceptually what would it look like.
Well, I'm hoping staff will be able to come back with that, and I think it would be worthwhile to see just how it will be done. And I just had a quick question following up on the step code, if I could. I agree with everything we're doing. I know we're moving in the right direction, but there is an additional cost to how to build what people are normally doing, and they're not necessarily jumping into the high-end step code. what is the cost? Do we have metrics, a quantitative number or metrics with regard to as we go up the step code, what does the cost of construction entail, in that the homeowner is eventually going to have to pay for that? So is it an increase? Is it a small amount? And what are the alternatives? Do we know that?
Can we
Your Worship.
generalize like that?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor McNulty. When the STEP code was initiated in 2018, there was a number of costing studies looking at multiple pathways to achieve the standard. At the time, the estimations were 1% to 4%, depending on the step. Initial steps were minimal increases in capital costs. But as we've evolved and changed and learned more, in particular the capacity building and the education the city's providing, we're seeing that those costs, as we understand them to date, are in that range still. We've had support from the building community on those changes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work in the area. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through you, the chair. I also will be supporting everything on the consent agenda, and I'll just comment on two and a couple quick questions. First of all, with the public electric vehicle charging program, the city, it says in the report, owns a number of chargers, and with a few more coming online. And we all know EV sales are, in demand and growing all the time as well. But as the infrastructure expands, as noted on page 48 and 49, and the policy as well, the question I have is, what's the end game and what's the tipping point? If you think of transportation now, and if you think of the combination of government versus private business, government is not in the business of providing fuel, for instance, for public accessibility. So my question is there a bit of a vision, and it might be a little bit unfair, but is there a tipping point? Is there a vision of a point we get to where it's not incumbent upon the government, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, to be leading, which is a totally valid thing to do at this stage. But the question is, where is the point at which private business, private enterprise, private sources of EV charging start taking up the need so that it's not all on government? Although I think it is important to note government has a crucial role to play at the beginning stages. So if someone could comment on that, it's something I was just thinking about.
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, yes, the city shows leadership by getting the ball rolling, and our strategic objective is to provide charging at our city facilities so that we're setting the pace for the community, but it's generally not for the community at large. We expect the demand to be met by the private sector through residential installations, and we support that through education, policy, advocacy, and different bylaws that we do. But we do set the standard at our own facilities, and we will continue to build these stations for our own corporate fleet as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and I think it's a good role for government. I guess one of the issues too is technology doesn't seem to be quite there yet in terms of like publicly accessible charging stations if you're driving through a small town and need a quick charge. But I think that's technology that will come partly with government leadership and private enterprise. And my last comment is on the channel in Steveston. And, I appreciated the update that we received from the Harbour Authority, and Steveston is the largest fishing fleet in Canada. And I think there is an economic factor to consider with the Fraser River, not just Steveston, but the entire river. It's also culturally important. It's important to Canada, BC, as well as Richmond. And I'm a little disappointed to see how over time responsibility for dredging has shifted and has been mentioned, been downloaded to some degree onto the city and other stakeholders, whereas senior levels of government used to take care of that. And to be clear, dredging is very important and has to be done. And I also think it's important to point out that it's essentially a public safety issue. It has to be funded appropriately. It's not an overstatement to say that lives could be at risk if a ship runs aground. Certainly people could be injured. It's also a big environmental factor. If you have a a significant sized ship run aground, larger than 9 feet, but that carries a lot of fuel and that kind of thing. Once it lists to about 30 degrees, my understanding is it will begin to leak contaminants into the river. And obviously that could be much worse. So I think it's important that we address the issue. I think it's important that we work with as many stakeholders as we can, in particular the province and the federal government as well. And if we have to share responsibility for doing it, then we should provide that leadership as well. But it's an environmental risk, it's a public safety risk, and it's something that has been maybe ignored to a degree for too long. So I'm really glad to see we're addressing that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting all the items on the consent agenda and just wish to speak to two. Number 7, the Public Electric Vehicle Charger Program update. The request for advocacy on legislation requiring the installation of electric vehicle charging stations in strata buildings came from a delegate at the May 18th Public Works Committee meeting. It was brought up that the provincial government was asked to consider the electric vehicle right to charge legislation, a resolution that was brought forward and passed at the 2019 UBCM, and that nothing has happened yet on the provincial side. And this really resonated with me. I've spoken to many people over the last couple of years who have electric vehicles and live in strata complexes where there is no ability to charge their vehicle at their home. So cost is a big issue, we know that. And while we require all new multifamily complexes to rough in the electricals for EVs, it's my understanding that often strata councils put off the actual installation as it is cost prohibitive, and perhaps there are only a few EV owners in the building. And of course, we know that older complexes are also lagging behind. I purchased an electric vehicle in 2019, and it cost me $1,800 to get the electrical upgrade to my home. Fortunately, there was a rebate available to me from the car manufacturer, which covered most of the costs. So definitely the time is now to do some advocacy on this. And number 9, the Steveston Cannery Channel. You know, at the June 6th General Purposes Committee, Ms. Gusto, General Manager, Steveston Harbor Authority, updated committee on the urgent issue facing the Steveston Harbor Authority regarding the dredging at the Steveston Cannery Channel. And, you know, she said that while discussions are ongoing with the province and the federal governments and are looking hopeful, the city was asked to contribute 1/3 of the cost of dredging, so approximately $1.6 million. I thought we had a really good discussion at committee regarding the need for a sustainable funding formula to conduct dredging regularly. And there was also consideration that the city express its concern, as Councillor Hobb mentioned, that the federal government has been downloading a significant cost to maintain a national strategic asset to the local government. And concern was also expressed regarding the length of time required to obtain a dredging permit. So now is the time to look at this, and hopefully we'll get some traction with this. And we know that behind the scenes, that our staff have been working with all the stakeholders on this pressing issue. So thank you for that. That's all, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to comment on the dredging. All the other items on the agenda are great, but I do want to talk about the dredging for just a minute. I've actually got photographs from about 1940s and 50s of the river from Steveston to New Westminster. At that time, Steveston had the deepest harbor on the river, about 30 feet of water in front of all the canneries. And the federal government decided that the main port with the deepest water should be New Westminster. So they set up a program they call trifurcation and channelization of the river. And I've got all the maps as to how they built wing dams and built riprap and rock jetties to redirect the water to the center of the river so that the river would be somewhat self-scouring. And what that did, it created Steveston Sandbar, and then eventually it created Steveston Island. They promised that they would dredge our harbor because they had redirected the water from the harbor, so our harbor would fill up. They promised to keep it dredged, and for decades the Coast Guard did dredge the harbor. And then, of course, they started downloading, and they forgot that they had destroyed our harbor in the first place in order to create a harbor that didn't exist to any depth into Westminster and Surrey and all along the river. So I think we need to remind them of that history, and if anybody needs those photographs, I've got them filed somewhere. It shows where all the wing dams and the channelization structures were built. The second comment I wanted to make was on having a dredge. Decades ago, a fellow named Ed Maskell, I went to school with him. I think he was either a year ahead of me or a year behind me. So I've tried to track him down, and I don't know if he's around anywhere or not. But he's the one that had the sand dump at Gary Point. He had a suction dredge in Steveston Harbor, and they simply sucked the contents out and dumped them across the dike. I don't know if it was him or not but a suction dredge was used to build up where the entire BC Packers site and well, Britannia Shipyard site 6 feet above. As they're 6 feet of fill where the Britannia Shipyard is. The original buildings were on 6-foot stilts, and they put the earth up to the base of the buildings. And that was done with a suction dredge. I do know that Maskell used to dredge Scotch Pond, and they simply, with their suction dredge, they simply had pipes going out on the marshes of Sturgeon Banks, and they actually created more foreshore. The soil went out and spread around, and grass grew on it, and the marsh got bigger. If we were able to get a suction dredge, we could do that for Scotch Pond. It would be more difficult to do it in the harbor. We'd have to have some place for the soil to go. The other aspect is in recent years, they've used a crane with a clam on it and lifted the soil up and dumped it in a barge, and of course dumped it at sea. We could do that too if the city owned one. It's just simply all you got to do is own a barge and a crane with a clam bucket on it to do that kind of work. But what we would need is someplace to put it, because it should be class 1 farm soil. The only thing we'd have to worry about would be the salt content, because at the bottom of the river is salt water instead of fresh. So I think these are things we should look at. If we were to dump it out in Sturgeon Banks, we do want to build sea berms out there, and it would be great for building sea berms as long as you've got rocks and other materials of keeping it in place. So I think it's not going to be a short-term solution, but I think it could be a long-term solution.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I too will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda. I understand that there's a barge available on English Bay. Maybe we can grab a hold of that one. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think there's a lot of great points that have been made. What I do have is a couple questions for staff on item 11 and 12. It seems to me that these are 2 homes side by side. They're going to be subdivided, the properties, and so what was 2 homes will now become 4 homes with 4 suites in them. Is that correct? Now, if a builder had wanted to do row houses, is there any process whereby they could have done this? Because I know council asked some years ago for builders to come up with some more creative ways for people to own houses. I know that just in today's conversation already, talking about e-charging, the challenges that happen in strata buildings, and then talking about the energy step code, my understanding is if you can build more dense buildings like a row house, that they're more efficient to heat in the wintertime and possibly cool in the summertime. So just wondering, if someone wanted to do row houses there, they probably could have put 5 there. They probably could have put some suites in them. Maybe they could have pulled them forward a bit and then had some actual grass in the backyard and had some more livable space there. But what would have been the process for that? Or is that even contemplated?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, in terms of row houses, we do have allowances within our official community plan for row houses to be constructed in the city. However, in this location, there is a lot size policy which does restrict rezoning and subdivision to what you see before you today, which is 2 single-family lots for each lot on a compact 10-foot or 10-meter wide lot approximately.
Okay, and this area wouldn't have allowed townhouses either? Is that correct? Even though they're right next to some townhouses?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, that is correct.
Okay, but when we do go through our official community plan reboot, that will be the opportunity for people to talk about what is acceptable in their neighborhood, what is good, and if this is a good option for people. Because I know
the insurance rates seem to be a lot lower if you own your whole piece of property and your house, versus I live in a strata and our strata fees have doubled and it's entirely just the insurance costs on it. And, you know, I've heard from other people who even have standalone homes, but because they're stratified, their insurance costs have gone way up, even though the risk of fire or anything else doesn't exist because they're standalone homes, but stratified. So hopefully this is something we'll look at deeper because, you know, certainly we're all looking at different options. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Al.
Yes, Worship, much has been said about the agenda for tonight, and I'm not going to repeat most of the things being spoken already. But I want to ask questions, some brief comments on item 7, 9, and 10. So for the item 7, electric vehicle charger program. Well, of course, I think we know that you know, the use of electrical cars is making advancements, and there are more people using that. And the fact that we need to write a letter to the provincial government to asking them to really adopt the right to charge program for buildings. Now, I want to ask staff, you know, what has been the hesitation or hindrance for the provincial government to adopt that program?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, uncertain specifically what the hesitation is. There is no such offering in the national code. So at this stage, it's up to the provinces to implement such a legislation. To date, there has been no legislation in Canada. So, you know, I think it might be a matter of who goes first potentially, but specifically why the hesitation, staff aren't aware.
And what has been the dialogue between the provincial government and the city or the, UBCM?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, I'd have to check on UBCM if there's been any past resolutions forwarded. Ultimately, staff haven't had direct communication other through staff, noting that it is a preferred piece of legislation to move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully in the letter we'll get some response from the provincial government. And on item 9, now I think downloading has been mentioned a few times. Obviously, the other levels of government are downloading their responsibilities to the local government, and because they're more distant from the community, so they can get away with it. But we, as a local government, we have to deal with the problem that is at our face. Now, on page 69, it's mentioned that the federal government and the Port of Vancouver were one time partners on the dredging. So I want to ask the first question: who owns the water? Who has a jurisdiction over the water at the harbor? Because I think, you know, if it is the ownership of the water by the federal government, should they not have a responsibility to keep it safe and do the dredging? How could they download the responsibility if, you know, they is really owned by them in the water? So who owns the water?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, there is multi-jurisdictional. We have agreements in place along the foreshore, but ultimately it's through the province. And then different jurisdictions manage the waterway.
Okay, so the federal government has part of it, part of the ownership. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
So the federal government has part of the ownership or jurisdiction over the water.
Ultimately, it's through the province and Port Metro, but we would be seeking support from the federal government.
Okay, good. Now, and for the second question is, the Port of Vancouver has supported the dredging or funded partly the dredging from 2009 to 2019. So what made them stop after 2019?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, the last time we did the dredging initiative was from 2013 to 2019. It was a one-time initiative. with the province, the City of Richmond, the Corporation of Delta, Port Metro Vancouver, Stevenson Harbor Authority, and that was because of the downloading. We needed to do dredging to make it safe, make it passable. That was a one-time initiative that we were still looking for a long-term solution at that time, and similar to why we're in front of you again today.
Okay, good. Thank you for the clarification. And finally, on item 10, I'm glad that on page 79, staff mentioned that we are one of the first municipalities to adopt the BC Energy Step Code into local regulation. And obviously, I think we have accomplished the goal of 20% more energy efficient by 2020 for new buildings. And we're looking forward to fulfilling the future goals for 2027 and 2032. My question is, on the next page, page 80, staff talk about the provincial government has been developing an opt-in standards. So can staff clarify what is the opt-in? Is it opt-in for the local government or opt-in for the builders? So who are we talking about when the government talks about the opt-in?
Your Worship, to Councillor Au, it's opt-in for local governments to legislate greenhouse gas requirements.
Oh, okay. So in other words, we can be a step forward.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Just before we go to our final speaker, I want to address the question that Councillor Au just raised about what did UBCM do about this right to charge? And I'll just read this out. I won't read it out in its entirety because it's rather wordy, but the resolution was, and this was endorsed by the convention, and whereas British Columbians living in multifamily buildings without access to home charging infrastructures do not have legal recourse if they are refused permission to install and or use electric vehicle charging infrastructure in their own parking stall. Therefore, be it resolved that UBCM requests that the province develop right to charge rules, such as those in place in Ontario, California, and Hawaii, to facilitate access to home charging infrastructures for British Columbians living in multifamily buildings. So to me, the resolution was clear. It's similar to ours, saying you may have a strata corporation that won't provide the opportunity. They have rules against you putting in your electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And they want, so you want the right to charge. Now, the provincial response, which I think really misses the point, is the provincial response is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. The province recognizes the importance of ensuring that all British Columbians who wish to purchase or lease electric vehicles have access to charging infrastructure to meet this goal and has started taking steps to support EVs in strata housing. In 2018, the strata property regulation was amended to permit strata corporations, to impose reasonable consumption-based user fees for the use of common property or common assets such as electric vehicle chargers. As a result, strata corporations now have the option to recover installation, operating, and maintenance costs for the charging station via a user fee. Ongoing provincial grant programs have helped overcome financial barriers to installing chargers. Government is actively exploring new ways to support electric vehicle charging in multi-unit residential buildings to ensure that British Columbia continues to be a leader in electric vehicle adoption. So in terms of that response to the UBCM, I would suggest that the province missed the point. The point is that you may have a user who wants to hook up their EV charger, and the strata corporation is prohibiting that. So you want the right to charge, so presumably at your own expense, you'll put in this charger and you'll have it for your own electric vehicle. So I find that response disappointing. although now they are talking about right to charge legislation, and hopefully that will give the, and that's what we're encouraging, is the right for the individual strata owner or occupier to put in their own infrastructure, regardless of whether the strata corporation is in favor of it or not. So just to answer that good point. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody, and thank you for that explanation. It is a shame that the province missed the point, but when you're writing the letter to the province, I'd like to suggest that they change the name from the right to charge legislation, which sounds like they're going to charge people, to the right to plug in. You know, it's a simple little thing because this is confusing. And when I first read this, I was like, whoa, you have to charge people? So just a suggestion. I just want to point out to the public that in Richmond, we have public charging stations in 51 ports, and then there's 7 more that are going to be built shortly. And from a corporate perspective, the city of Richmond has 24 ports right now, and we very soon will have a total of 81. So we're doing our part to have as many EV charging stations as possible. So any help we can get from the province would certainly be awesome. The Richmond Animal Shelter Public Art, it's $35,000 for the art and $9,000 to maintain it and install it. And the artists will have the opportunity of either building like a fence that's the art or having the art attached to a fence that will be built. But we're not going to do that public art until after the animal shelter is completed. Number 9 is the Steveston Cannery Channel. Well, we've talked a lot about that. Well, I attended the Steveston Harbor Authority meeting just a month ago, and was really pleased that Jamie Gusto, the CAO of the Steveston Harbor Authority, could come and explain the very critical situation to Richmond City Council. I would love for Richmond to take the lead, and I made a motion that we just commit to putting the money forward, but council decided that we needed to direct staff to get the actual costs. Well, according to the report that we got from Jamie Gusto, the cost is, the last estimate was $5 million. If the federal government, the provincial government, the Steveston Harbor Authority, and Richmond all contributed, that would be just $1.25 million each. And I think that Richmond will hopefully take a lead so that the others will follow suit. Someone has to go first, and I think that Richmond should do this. We've spent money for dredging in the past, as was mentioned by staff, and it needs to be something that happens regularly, not just willy-nilly every 8 or 10 years. The larger boats, I spoke to the skippers of some of the larger fishing boats, and they have a lot of trouble getting into the harbor, and they can only come in at high tide. And I got to tell you, if it wasn't for their skill set, these skippers could easily run aground, and we could have a disaster that could cost human life. It could also cost an environmental disaster because these ships have a lot of fuel on them. And if they were to run aground or tip over, that would be a disaster that would be very expensive to clean up. So when we're writing to the provincial, federal governments, I think we need to remind them of their fiscal responsibility in the event of an environmental disaster. So it's either pay me now or pay me later. Let's just get it done. I did have a question of staff on items 11 and 12. As previously mentioned, these are 2 developments where a single-family home is being divided into 2 homes. And it does say there's single-family homes in both these lots, but in actuality, they have suites in all, well, there's 2 suites going into each new lot. So for each, there's going to be 4 suites and 4 houses where there currently is 2 houses. So would that not be considered more than a single-family home? It's just, it says on page, on the chart on page, for example, 117, 2 single-family dwellings. But should we not be rewording that so that it reflects what's actually going to be built?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, in terms of the definition of a single-family home, these are single-family homes. The secondary suite cannot be strata titled. It has to remain part of the principal dwelling. So while I agree there are 2 dwellings per lot that will be created, it is still a single-family home with a secondary suite.
Okay, then my next question is, it says that the minimum size of each one of those suites, each one of those 4 suites, is 355 square feet. What would it take to increase that so that we could have family-friendly units that potentially have 2 bedrooms?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, we do encourage developers to provide as large a suite as possible. In this instance, the developers were only willing to commit to a minimum of 1 bedroom. Through the design development stage, that may increase. However, all we can definitively guarantee at this point in time is 1 bedroom.
So could council change that rule to make, like, well, how many square feet would we have to have a 2-bedroom suite instead of a 1-bedroom suite?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I don't think you can specify based on square footage. I think the design of the unit would vary. So it is possible to have a very efficient small 2-bedroom unit. It really comes down to the ability for the developer to accommodate the unit. It is within council's discretion to specify a minimum size. In terms of the city's affordable housing strategy, it simply requires provision of a suite, no specified size or a cash in lieu contribution. So this application before you does comply with the city's affordable housing policy.
That might be something we need to revisit in the planning committee. Thank you very much for that.
I just want to finish off the discussion with it about the dredging. Because I know that our relatively new Member of Parliament from Steveston, Richmond East, Parham Baines, has been working very hard on that following the meetings we had with him when he was first elected. I'm suggesting that at least potentially this is a far bigger issue than has been specifically identified. I see partners ranging from Metro Vancouver, where MP Baines had a very favorable conversation the other day, the Port of Vancouver, the Steveston Harbour Authority, the federal government, the provincial government, the city of Delta, which has a very major problem on its hands. It's probably actually more advanced than the Steveston Channel problem. And certainly the Musqueam First Nations should be involved as well. So I see this, I see the group getting together and deciding on the ambit of the dredging issue. And first of all, coming up with a formula and the costing to solve it for now. And then the same group coming up with a strategy as to having a sustainable program for years to come so that we don't have to revisit this every few years. It seems like it's just a recurring situation, which is always somewhat of a problem. So with that, I'm going to call the question on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to public announcements. From our closed council this afternoon, there's an appointment to the Advisory Design Panel. Kristen Defer was appointed to the Advisory Design Panel for the remainder of a 2-year term, and that expires at the end of this year, December 31st. And from the Planning and Development Division, there are no DP panel items to be forwarded to the June 15th DP panel meeting. Therefore, that meeting has been canceled. Of a more general nature, I'm pleased to announce the recipients of the 2022 Richmond Heritage Awards. The annual awards recognize Richmond individuals and organizations dedicated to conserving historic places and promoting an awareness of Richmond's diverse heritage. So we have 5 recipients this year: Ken Chow of Interface Architecture, Christine McGilvery, the president of the Friends of the Richmond Archives, Tonari Gumai of the Japanese Community Volunteers Association and the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center, Cornerstone Christian Academy and the Gulf of Georgia Cancer Society, and the Initiative for Student Teaching and Research in Chinese Canadian Studies. Now, details of the recipients and all their initiatives will be issued by news release in the morning and posted to our website. Now, June is National Indigenous History Month, and National Indigenous Peoples Day is Tuesday, June 21st. This is an opportunity to further recognize the rich history, heritage, resilience, and diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people across Canada. A variety of in-person and virtual events and activities are taking place throughout Richmond, including workshops, story talks, and film screenings. So for details, please visit the city's website. Now, the Friends of the Richmond Library are hosting another popular book sale this weekend on June 18th and 19th, this time at the Cambie branch on Cambie Road. There will be a good selection of gently used books, including adult fiction, children's books, Chinese language, art, biography, personal development, healthy living, and various nonfiction categories. Sales are cash only, with all the proceeds to benefit the Richmond Public Library. So if you want more details, go to the library website /Friends of the Library. Now, children ages 5 to 16 years in Richmond can take advantage of our special $29 summer pass. The unlimited access pass allows them to swim, skate, and golf all summer with drop-in access to public programs until September 6th at facilities including the Minoru Centre for Active Living, Watermania, South Arm and Steveson Outdoor Pools, the Richmond Ice Centre, and West Richmond Pitch and Putt. So if you want to go and find more information on that, if you want to purchase a pass, go to our website /pass. And finally, the South Arm Outdoor Pool is now open. Residents now have the choice of 2 outdoor pools in Richmond. Steveson is also open, along with the outstanding aquatic facilities of the Minoru Centre for Active Living. So location, hours, and other details are on our website. So, Madam Clerk, bylaws for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 3 bylaws for final adoption. The first bylaw has opposition, and the last 2 bylaws have no noted opposition.
All right.
Move the last 2.
Okay, so we're moving the last 2. That's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, any opposed? That is carried. And on the first one?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few questions on this and how it relates to the item that was approved during the consent agenda, if I may. I know there's no pages for this, but council can see where I'm talking about at the end of our agenda in the development permit panel section. There's that pink cover page, and then it's just 2 pages in after that. It's the report. So my first question is this development that's proposed will achieve step code 3. Could staff just comment if this was 1 month later, would that same thing be allowed?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, yes, in terms of the step code requirements, this application would achieve step code 3 even if it was to come forward a month from now.
Thank you. My second question to staff, through your worship, relates to the last part of this report. It mentions the panel discussion and that there was a noted discussion between staff and the developer on asphalt roof shingles, and the developer, I guess, decided to continue with the more negatively impactful method. Could staff just comment, is this a common discussion? Do normally we get developers to choose a different material? And if so, what material are we seeing developers shift to?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, in terms of the staff review, we do focus on our design guidelines in the OCP in terms of compliance. With respect to direction from the panel, that is something that is within the development permit panel's purview. With this specific application, there was a discussion over the roof material, and that's why staff had that discussion with the applicant.
Okay, great. Thank you to staff for providing that additional comment. I'll just provide a further comment then myself. Yeah, so I was opposed at second, third reading when this came to me, and I still will have some opposition, and the 2 reasons for that. One, climate emergency that we're under and the heat wave that hit us exactly a year ago And to think that the 14 trees that will be taken down on both sides of this property, the east and the west side of them, will no longer be there for the shading effect. And I do note, I'm aware of the tree protection bylaw and the trees that they'll have to plant in replacement. And it's not like the giant sequoia that was just planted on that property on Williams, because that soil was still available to plant large trees in. This development seems to not give room for that type of a tree transplant. Also, again, there's 14 trees plus 2 more outside the property line, and hedges, a number of hedges that don't count, apparently, so they get removed. And then secondly, during the housing crisis that we're in, and looking at the map, I can't direct it to you because it's hard to find it. It's in the middle of all of our pages at the back, so I'll just hold it up. And just seeing where the proposed buildings will go and where the large driveway and road, internal roadway will be. Clearly, that would be a space where if we were to allow for higher density because we need it, and this is an arterial road, and we could actually sandwich that development that might go to the 3 stories and be able to use space that's now going to go in between these buildings or in between the roofs. We could actually have, what I see is more units, less impact on the neighborhood. I do appreciate the variance that is going ahead here, where they're giving more space between the neighbors to the east. Yes, thank you. Someone called out east. And so I just see that this is the type of parcel that could accommodate a greater density. And as I was looking through the energy step code projects that other municipalities have been having, this is an example where they would say, okay, where are the existing trees? How can we provide a building location? And that's typically where they start. They find the best building location with the existing property. And to me, this is just keeping a couple trees on the periphery, losing the most significant ones, and is a bit more of a status quo townhouse development. But that's where we're at this stage. So those are my reasons for opposition. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Day, before I go to you, I didn't stop Councillor Wolf when he was talking about all these matters from the development permit panel. But I don't expect to hear anything more about the development permit process. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that direction. Okay, when we first looked at this, it seemed like the best plan we could come up with, and I did vote for it. But it seems like life is changing and the housing crisis is getting worse and worse and worse every day. I can't tell you how many emails I've had from people that can't find any place to live, literally not even a garage. So given that this is an arterial road, it seems to me that this would be a good time to reconsider this application. And even if these 3-level townhouses were turned into 2-level townhouses with apartments on the 3rd level, like Manoa Village many years ago was built. Actually, my daughter lived in Manoa Village, and it was a brilliant plan because it made the townhouses on the bottom and 2nd floor much more affordable, and it made the apartments on the 3rd level even more affordable. So given that 95% of people, according to the Richmond Housing Needs Assessment, can't afford to buy in Richmond, it seems to me that if we revamp this design, and I'm not saying tear it down to the bare bricks, but what we could do is potentially allow suites on the top levels of the 3-level townhouses facing Garden City. And we could get really creative here, and maybe this becomes a poster child for other developments down the road. So I think I'm going to change my vote to no, because the situation has changed so dramatically in the last while that we have to get serious about every single application, every single development. We got to squeeze whatever we can get out of each one. So I'm going to oppose it.
I'll also remind council that once we get to the public hearing, we are not to be consulting the public. The public is to have no more input into the situation. 3rd reading was in 2019, and so if it was challenged, based on those remarks that were just made, you cannot have public input into a project following that public hearing. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillor Wolf and Councillor Day opposed. Development Permit Panel, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two recommendations. Recommendation 1, that the Chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on November 25th, 2022 be received for information, and that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of a development permit for the property located at 9020 Glen Ellen Gate, 9460, 9480, and 9500 Garden City Road be endorsed and the permit so issued.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, carried. We are now adjourned.